Welcome back, everybody. I'd like to introduce our next speaker presentation for you, the Community Contractor Success in Regional and Indigenous Communities, and introduce to you Ramone Close, Director of Yindi Manufacturing, an Indigenous company that builds and manufactures chairs here in Australia. Ramone believes that finding someone a job can change their life, and this motto drives Ramone to form great relationships with communities to provide long-term employment opportunities. Ramone created an Indigenous business in Churbong, which provides employment opportunities for the local Indigenous community. And over the past 5 years, he's created and implemented several community projects to effect positive change and to better understand the socio-economic challenges Aboriginal people face in urban and rural communities. Please welcome Ramone to the stage.
Thanks, Nicola. Good afternoon, all. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which I'm currently dialing in from, the Gubbi Gubbi people. I would also like to acknowledge all of you who have joined today, as well as the countries you guys are dialing in from as well. I'd also like to thank the industry partners, as well as James Thomas, for this opportunity to partake in this Connected Industries Forum for the Australian wind turbine industry. So my name's Ramone Close. I'm a First Nations man connected to Gidabal country in New South Wales, Wollongong, Quandamooka country, Stradbroke Island, Queensland, and Butchulla country, Fraser Island, Queensland. I work to provide educational pathways and opportunities for First Nations communities through employment. As Nicola mentioned, I have a company called Yindi Manufacturing, and we manufacture commercial office seating here in Australia. And I'm endeavouring to become a leader in advanced manufacturing of plastics componentry to supply to the manufacturing industry of commercial office furniture. Today, I'd like to share my story, share my journey through the lens of an Indigenous man that's, in business. I would also like to, highlight the two worlds that, exist. When we speak of, Western frameworks as well as Indigenous frameworks, which I've come to know. Outside of my company, Yindi Manufacturing, I also consult to non-Indigenous companies on their Indigenous advancement strategies and their frameworks, and I also help them with their business strategies to be innovative, to be able to work better with our communities, to provide better outcomes for their companies and Indigenous communities. So my journey started as a young footballer. I travelled the world. I'd lived in a number of countries, Poland, Belgium. We speak of different worlds, definitely different worlds in those countries not speaking the language. So that was a very, very eye-opening experience for me. After leaving Europe and coming back to Australia, I dived into my professional career, working across a number of different sectors, including government employment, private employment and recruitment, alcohol and drug rehabilitation, residential, youth detention centres, as well as starting a number of initiatives within the Indigenous community, from remote football, soccer programs, as well as starting a state football tournament, which runs yearly and attracts teams, Indigenous teams from all over Australia. I've also started a youth residential facility caring for young Indigenous sportsmen aged 18 to 25 and taught them how to cook, clean, live a healthy lifestyle. I would set them up with employment as well as at their respective sporting clubs. Through my Indigenous football program that I took out to country Queensland, I visited Aboriginal communities like Doomadgee, Mornington Island, Cherbourg, Normanton and Mount Isa. And it was a big shock for me. I grew up in a city. I come from a strong cultured background and family, but I had a lot of non-Indigenous friends and grew up quite normal. But as I grew and as I dived into my professional career, I could see the differences, between Western constructs and how they fitted into our communities and us as Aboriginal people and how we see them. So heading into remote Queensland, it was a big shock for me to understand, the barriers our communities face there, the lack of opportunities. And it was then that I really, I suppose, started a journey of entrepreneurship and trying to understand, how we can change these things. I was in these communities, there's a lot of government agencies, government organisations servicing our people, but there was a lack of industry, no opportunities to, work, no opportunities to advance, unless you move from a community to the city. So my journey then led me on a path of trying to find a solution. And, I'd met a gentleman who owns one of Australia's largest commercial office furniture wholesale companies. And I spoke to him about my experiences and my journey and my passion to want to find solutions, to the issues that we face in our Aboriginal communities, and in remote areas. And he had an idea to start an upholstery operation. So we were having a yarn, and sure enough, we started a commercial upholstery operation in Cherbourg, a Aboriginal community 3 hours northwest of Brisbane. It was a very interesting journey. We started consulting like you would, with any new business. We're asking questions, trying to understand, how to best approach it, where do we start, and it was very interesting. Myself being an Indigenous man, my business partner being a non-Indigenous man. So, together through this journey, we learn a lot, about the Indigenous or Aboriginal world, but I also learn a lot about business and Western constructs of business, and over time we work together to mend the two worlds together. So at the beginning of our journey, and consulting with both Indigenous stakeholders and non-Indigenous stakeholders, it was quite interesting to receive feedback and opinions and advice on our operation and our ideas, and a lot of it was negative. The negative connotations and perceptions of Aboriginal communities, that we see on TV, were at the forefronts of a lot of people's minds when we're yarning to them, and I'm sure some of these I suppose experiences are real, but along this journey, we're receiving feedback from Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people that you shouldn't be going out there. It's not going to work. It's not going to last. It might get burnt down, and so we continued. And I was very grateful for my non-Indigenous business partner. That was very passionate about finding a solution. Very, very passionate about this journey and assisting me and starting an industry in Cherbourg to see what we could do. So we continued our journey, and we started an upholstery operation there. The first hurdle was finding an upholsterer. Upholsterers are a dying trade, and I was recruiting, I was looking around, but sure enough, I found an Indigenous upholsterer. So I got really lucky there. So we got our upholsterer, and my first hurdle was how am I going to manage this? I'm based in Brisbane. I've got an operation now in Cherbourg. So my first thought was, we need to invest in the community, and that was the reason we started the business, is to invest in the community and train up community members, so they could take ownership, and take on that opportunity and build and provide more employment opportunities to other community members. So as time went on, we eventually had about 8 casual staff members. It wasn't smooth sailing like any business. We had our hurdles from absenteeism to training, to just, community questions, people wanting to understand, what's going on there and what's it about, how do we get involved, how can I apply for employment? So in time, I started to get to know the community. I then also started to feel the pressure from my business partner's side of the world, and there's a commercial aspect to all businesses, but it became very real. After about 6 months of operating, we started to get bigger, we started to grow, and it was great. Employees started to build in terms of their confidence, their keenness to want more work, to want to learn and expand. But what I found was that the demand coming from the Western world to the capacity that we had in Cherbourg wasn't 100% meeting up. So essentially, as the middleman, had to really quickly learn how do I best manage this? How do I manage my crew in Cherbourg, and how do I manage our commercial contract and meet in the middle? And in time, I found that it was quite hard, and unfortunately, the commercial side of business, it was fixed. There wasn't any flexibility. It was, we need this and we need this now, or else. And I understood that, having worked in the city across a number of different sectors and industries. But we were in a Indigenous community, and we started an operation there to help a community build capacity. But these hurdles, approached quite quickly. So as the journey went on, I started to work, I suppose, the situation out, and I got to a point where it was quite hard because the commercial relationships and that Western business construct couldn't be flexible or innovative enough to meet the needs of the community. And this is where we see many operations, many programs fall short in Aboriginal communities due to the lack of understanding of the capacity of the community, the lack of spending enough time in terms of working with community, training community and communicating with community. So that was one of the big hurdles that I learned through that upholstery operation in Cherbourg. Unfortunately, that operation is no longer running, and that was due to COVID. To be honest, if COVID didn't hit, we would still be operating, and we'd still be building the capacity. But it was a real eye opener for me, and it was after that experience that I realised, wow, okay, this is where a lot of non-Indigenous companies fall short when engaging with Aboriginal communities. They just simply don't understand what it's like there. They don't understand the perception of the people in the community and how we work as Aboriginal people. But I think one of the main hurdles and issues that I'd recognise is that companies often aren't flexible enough or innovative enough to find new ways to do business and offer opportunities to people. So for me, that was really interesting. And after Guri finished, I had a bit of a short stint with a training company that was working in Cherbourg as well. So I was based in Brisbane working for this training company, and I assisted this company with their advancement strategy when it comes to engaging with Aboriginal communities. It was very interesting. The same hurdles arose around a non-Indigenous company wanting to engage in an Aboriginal community, but not wanting to be flexible enough or innovative enough or even take enough time to sit down and formulate a plan to really engage, really build capacity, and really enjoy a journey of success in terms of operating a business in an Aboriginal community. So one of the hurdles that I'd faced in this company and what I'd done, so there was a role that was available in Cherbourg, and the company wanted to employ someone non-Indigenous. So typically, this company would employ someone non-Indigenous. The turnover was quite high, and one of my suggestions was you need to employ someone in the community. But I also knew that if we employed someone in the community, you needed to support them like you would any employee. The issues and the hurdles that I'd faced there is that, again, the company was so caught up in their commercial contracts and their businesses, the fast pace of the city, that they didn't offer enough support. Whether that person was Indigenous or not, I feel that was the main issue. Not understanding, the barriers and the complexities of a community. So that was my role to go out to Cherbourg every now and then and understand it more. And what I understood is, in Aboriginal communities, we operate differently there. There's a lot of families there. We're one big mob, and if you're working 9 to 5, and 5 o'clock comes, your job doesn't stop. You get calls from community, family that you're servicing. So it's almost a 24-hour role there. But also, structures that we're working to within the same company in the city did not match the same structures that were needed in the community. So there was a complete contradictions of both worlds in terms of a company and a structure here wanting to work in an Indigenous community, but they just simply didn't match. And then the outcomes of that were, it's tough in a community. The people there just don't have the capacity. Although through my business prior to this role, I'd recognise that it's certainly achievable, but it really comes down to that business and how innovative they are and how much they care to want to understand the scope of what they're walking into. So moving on from that employment opportunity and understanding the pitfalls and misconceptions and what doesn't what does work and what doesn't work, I now work with a number of organisations to help them engage in a community, understand the stakeholders in the community, get to the bottom of the actual truth around what happens in the communities, why things happen. One of the main, I suppose, I received some advice from a politician, based on Aboriginal communities and how they're ran. And I wanted to share this with you because it is reality and it'll give you some good insight as to the barriers that our communities face in these Aboriginal communities, but also their capacity. So in every Aboriginal community around Australia, they're all government funded, from the community members that are receiving government benefits to the organisations that are receiving government funding, from the health organisations, Centrelink, all of the organisations. So essentially they're all government funded and government ran. And in turn, there's a lack of opportunity in terms of jobs and industry and further development. So when we talk about building capacity, it's hard to build capacity if there aren't opportunities to build capacity, and if you can't offer meaningful pathways to build, community members, from the lower socioeconomic end of the scale, which is why, I started an industry in Cherbourg, to test these theories, to see what I could do. And it's certainly achievable, but it just takes, understanding, knowledge, relationships, communication, and it's certainly achievable. So my takings from working in an Aboriginal community, and some advice I would give to anyone looking to want to work in an Indigenous community, like any project or any sector, you need to understand you need to understand the community, you need to understand the environment, in terms of what you're walking into. Then you need to build relationships within the community. A lot of misconceptions are, you need to talk to elders, you need to talk to this person, you need to talk to that person. There are protocols in our communities, but, councils are normally the first step to have a yarn, to introduce yourself to the communities. Having a yarn to the council, who have Indigenous board members, who are aware of all the organisations in the communities, that'll be the first port of call. But then outside of that, like any community, you can definitely engage, third-party consultants to assist in bridging this gap. But it's traditional relationship building. If you're genuine about wanting to help the Indigenous community work within an Indigenous community, it's as simple as, going there, spending some time. Oh, hey, who's this person? Who's that person? Can I have a yarn to them? Secondly, in terms of your business and your frameworks and your commercial contracts, they need to be flexible and innovative enough to be able to work for your company and the community and its members. Unfortunately, again, they're two worlds, and like I've alluded to, they're two very different worlds for a reason. So in order to be successful in an Aboriginal community, we need to build relationships, have strong communication, but mainly be innovative with your, policies, your structures, and be flexible. And I truly believe that if you do, anything can be achieved in Aboriginal communities. All right, thank you.
Thanks so much, Ramone. I wonder if we'll just have one quick question, conscious that we're running behind schedule today. What do you think is the greatest challenge for these industry sectors coming into remote communities, that initial engagement? And I know that you talked towards the end of your presentation about how to approach things. What do you think is the biggest, key thing that they need to come into these communities with, that genuine sense of engagement to build trust? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's it's human engagement. It's like approaching a family member. If you're going in there with a business and you want to help and you want to offer employment, that's what you want to do. So number one, you just need to be comfortable. Go in there, have a yarn. I get it, new people, new environment. But, if you go in there, our communities can feel that. They can feel how genuine you are. And definitely communication is a big thing. If you communicate everything that you're doing, everything's on the table. They know what you're doing when you're doing it. Sometimes things don't work, and that's okay. As long as you put your hand up and say, sorry, we gave it a crack and we couldn't achieve it due to this and this. But that's the approach that I would definitely recommend, is, going in there like you would in any normal business relationship, engage, but really communicate what you're doing when you're doing it. And our communities are well aware of the logistics, of running businesses and understanding that you can't do everything all the time. So
Or make everybody happy all at once either.
That's correct.
Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. If anybody would like to engage with Ramone and talk more about Indigenous engagement, even learn more about his business and what he's doing in those respects, you can network with Ramone, or you can send him a direct message. And his, I believe your details will be shared for people to reach out to you personally post-conference as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Nicola.
Thanks, Ramone.
Bye.